In this presentation, we are going to talk about CPD and CPD reporting. And in particular, we're going to talk about the requirements for PD. We are going to talk about the implementation, perhaps, of your own plan to do enough PD in the year. And we're going to talk about documentation, which in this case and in many other places, documentation is becoming more important than performance. What you document is more important than what you did. And also, if you did something and didn't document it, you don't get any credit. So we have to pay close attention to documentation. And as always, we want to be efficient and effective, follow professional standards, and document what we have done properly. So some issues that we're going to talk about. First, there is some confusion about what compulsory professional development means, what it is, how you do it. There's also confusion about what verifiable PD is. Is it just a course that you get a certificate, or are there other things that qualify as verifiable? Talk a bit about costs. Talk about how you might do this if you're a sole practitioner with no staff. Talk about how you might do it if you're in a small firm, 2 or 3 people, maybe more. Then we're going to talk about the ethics requirements, the ethics PD requirements, because there's some confusion about that too. And as I said before, there are issues between documentation and performance. And so, for instance, if you sign up for a course and go to sleep in the back of the room all day, you will still get a certificate saying you were there and did 7 hours of PD. So your performance was lacking, but you got documentation. Maybe that's not right, but I don't know a solution to that. Now there is confusion, and if there is confusion, the solution is you need to read the requirements. You need to read what is required for PD, what the code says, what SQM 1 and 2 say in section 220. That's where the ethical and CPD requirements live. And I think the first piece of advice is don't listen to the opinions of others. People say, oh, I think this means that. Don't listen to them. Read the requirements yourself. And don't listen to this either. Don't listen to me. What do I know? Don't listen to others. Don't listen to the opinions of others. Read the material yourself. So some think CPD is only a course with a certificate of attendance. And I guess that confusion comes from there are a lot of courses, if you take it, they provide you with a certificate of attendance. That, however, is not the only way you can get qualifying verifiable PD. It's much broader than that. And some think it must be a course in accounting, auditing, or tax. And again, it's much broader than that because 80% or more CPAs are not in public practice. So it must be broader than that. You could be a CPA working for a company that teaches cooking courses, and some of your CPD might be in cooking because that's what you do, and to do your job you need to know about that. So it's much broader than that, and you may find me, because my experience is in public practice, you may find me going back to talking about accounting, auditing, and tax. It's much broader than that. So, as I said, see the published requirements, go to the internet, search CPD requirements, and put in your province, and they will come up. And you will note when they come up that the guidance provided in the frequently asked questions section comes with a disclaimer, which says, here's some guidance from your local provincial CPA group. However, if it's wrong, it's your fault, not ours. Now, I love providing disclaimers. I've already provided one in this course. But I'm not exactly sure that I think that's fair, that the group that regulates this and holds you to the standard won't provide you with clear guidance. So a little bit of a problem with that, but never mind, nothing I can do about it. Now, the certificate of attendance, and there are some presenters and some presentations where if you answer 3 trivia questions, get them right, after the presentation you get emailed a certificate. And CPA Canada does that. And sometimes the presentation is 50 minutes long, and the certificate is for an hour. Now, I have sometimes been told that by my provincial CPA group. Oh, it only took an hour and a half, but it was supposed to take 2, so you may claim 2 hours of verifiable CPD. Now, on the other hand, I have some colleagues who take some pride. The way they deal with these courses is before the course begins, they attempt to correctly guess the answers to the 3 trivia questions, and if they get all 3 right on the first go, they're pretty pleased with themselves. Then they let the program run for an hour, get emailed a certificate, and they have 1 hour of verifiable CPD documented with a certificate, and they had put it on mute and were doing something else. That's what they tell me they do. Now, some of the online presentations I've seen, my colleagues tell me the material is awful. For instance, the presentation is to describe changes to a particular section in professional standards, and they spend half the presentation on the history. There was the discussion paper, there were focus groups, there was an exposure draft, there was a re-exposure draft, there were changes to the re-exposure draft, and finally we have a standard. I really don't care about that. If I'm in practice, just tell me what has changed and do it correctly, and then tell me the significance to practice and my practice. Don't want all that history stuff. I suppose that's interesting to someone. To a practitioner in public practice, not interesting. A waste of time. But I guess if you get an hour of CPD and you had it on mute, what's the harm? Now, I quote, this comes from the Manitoba CPD site, verifiable CPD activity, research and publications. Conducting research in an area that expands your knowledge for a specific application in your professional role or to prepare a presentation or report. Now, they consider, for instance, if you are retired but you're serving on a board, that you must do CPD. And so if this relates to the board you're on, that's a specific application, the board you're on in your professional role. That is your current retired professional role, so that qualifies. Or to prepare a presentation or report. So doing this presentation on CPD qualifies as verifiable CPD. And I can tell you doing it, this is probably the 6th or 7th time I've recorded this presentation, which is going to end up being about a half hour long. So I've got 3 or 4 PD hours just doing that, and of course, much more time spent than just that. Second thing, it says writing or publishing technical articles, papers, books, or academic work. So writing or publishing a paper. If you write an article, qualifies as CPD. Qualifying number of hours, and again I quote, hours spent preparing or researching the presentation or report. Hours spent researching, authoring, or contributing to the publication. So I've just said this presentation, probably 10 or 15 or maybe 20 hours. I'm not done yet, but maybe 20 hours. I've done half my PD just by doing this presentation. Acceptable documentation. Again, I quote, a copy of the presentation, report, or published material, confirmation from a third party or employer. Well, this is going to end up on YouTube, and you're going to all see that it's half an hour. So half an hour of verifiable CPD right there. A log of hours by date for the presentation and or preparation research hours, again by date. So if I go and log on the provincial CPD PD website how long it took, I'm golden and it's verifiable. So as long as the disclaimer doesn't apply, as I've said, doing this presentation, including the preparation time, qualifies. And as I said, the documentation is it's on YouTube, and I have a log of hours recorded on the CPA Manitoba website. I'm okay. I've got a bunch of PD. And as I said, preparation time. You will find if you are doing a presentation for your firm, the preparation time is often 10 times the presentation time. Rehearsing, doing, researching, it is a time-consuming enterprise. The good news is it's all verifiable PD. Now, as I said, there's an issue. If you're retired and on a board, the CPA groups are of the opinion that you need to do CPD. That can be expensive and time-consuming. And it has to be related to the activity of the board. So if the board is the Food Cooking Council and you do PD on food cooking, that qualifies. So fortunately, writing an article about food, for instance, qualifies. And as I said, it can take a long time. The other thing that is observed is some board activities also qualify. Someone comes to a board meeting and makes a presentation on cooking, qualifies as CPD. So it's just a matter of documentation and paying attention, because these things may come by in 15-minute, half-hour chunks. Got to remember, write it down, record it, and then it's PD. Now, for instance, if you're a member or on the board of a coin club and you're retired and you wrote an article on coin collecting, and you record the time spent doing so on the provincial CPA CPD website, and you have a copy of the article, verifiable CPD. If you made a presentation to a local Rotary Club on coin collecting, qualifies as PD, again, along with the preparation time. Now, to get ahead of myself a little bit, if the presentation includes doing things right, for example, properly describing or valuing a coin, and you spend some time on that presentation, that's ethics. So if you document the presentation you have made and observe the time of the presentation and the time of preparation and then segregate out the ethics time, you've got ethics CPD as well. It's a question of documentation. Now, CPD costs, they're not cheap. Full day course, 7 hours, $300, and it takes a full day of time. So if you're trying to get 20 hours, that's $900 to $1,000. If you're retired, that's not cheap. But then again, that's not the only way you can get CPD. A 1 hour course, $100. Now, my observation from practice is the shorter the course, the easier it is to fit into a busy professional life or any life. So I found, for instance, that if I wanted to teach a one-day accounting and auditing update course, if I did it in a full day, A, people were tired at the end of the day, and B, a lot of people found it very difficult to have a full day available for that. Client conflicts, questions emerged. So I found, for instance, if I did it in 2 half days, it worked better. And probably the shorter period of time that you were trying to attract people's attention, it probably worked better. They probably remembered more. I've been in situations, I remember one time we taught a 14-day course to first-year staff. And I remember talking to some people after it and saying, well, you should know how to do an inventory count. You took a course in it. And they said, you know, that was 14 days. I really can't remember anything. It's all a blur. So worthwhile thinking about that. Whether people will remember something taken in a long course, whether it might be better to break it into smaller blocks. Now, if you're a sole practitioner, you should have figured this out already. If you watch a presentation from this YouTube site, it's all accounting and auditing stuff, qualifies as CPD. Now, how do you make it verifiable? Well, suppose you could use your cell phone and videotape yourself watching. And if someone cares to check that you actually did it, you will say, well, I have the half-hour videotape of me watching this presentation. You can look at it. Now, I suppose you'd store it securely. And perhaps this is a bit silly. It qualifies, and it qualifies anyway. The provincial institutes or groups say, if you do it and document it, and it was a formal presentation, you don't need a specific certificate. and maybe you worry about that a bit. So more fun, if you're a sole practitioner, find an interesting presentation on this or any other website about a professional topic that's of interest to you, and invite a colleague or two over for lunch. And you agree that, every 2 weeks you're going to do this, and you're going to rotate around people's offices, sit in their boardroom. Each person will buy sandwiches and entertain people. And you watch or do a presentation, and you discuss it. And then you can each provide the other people in the room with a certificate and rotate it around. That might be kind of fun. I always find if I think I know something, if I talk to someone else, I learn a bit more. So doing it as a group as opposed to by yourself, maybe not a bad idea. For a small firm, particularly if you're interested in training or alerting staff to new standards, pick a video, provide lunch, discuss it, include a presentation on how the firm is complying, what forms have been changed, what's being done different. Again, this is verifiable. Send out certificates for everybody so that they don't forget when at year end they're doing their declaration that, oh yeah, I took that course, and here I've got a piece of paper to remind me. Now, costs and benefits. Well, boardroom for lunch, it's the cost of lunch, much cheaper than $300 or $400 a day. And you probably build a little bit of team spirit. Folks enjoy getting together and finding out how the firm is positively adopting new standards. Now, someone will have to view and select a video, and their time, by the way, is properly logged, probably. Not going to come to any conclusion myself. Probably verifiable PD. So have the person report their time to you and give them a certificate. This certifies that staff member number 1 did this, spent 3 hours, picked a half-hour video for us to view, and then we all did it. Perfect. Now, ethics PD. Everybody has to do ethics PD, not just people in public practice. Everybody has to do ethics PD. And it has to be appropriate for your area. So if you work for a cooking company or on the board of a cooking company, your PD is about cooking. And your ethics requirement is about the ethics of cooking. I don't know, food safety, proper food handling, stuff like that. So it's not just the code of ethics. It's not just SQM 1 and 2 and 220 and stuff like that. It's rather a broad list of things, and it has to be appropriate for the area that you're in. So, first choice, a long list of things qualify. And again, if you go to your provincial CPA website, they will tell you, hey, there's a long list of things that qualify. One of the things I love is doing things right. Now, I don't know, I think every part of this presentation has been about doing it right. And maybe not the whole thing, but certainly part of it has been about doing things right. So it's often part of any course. You rarely take a course in, here is how to do this wrong. It's normally about doing it right. So when you are recording your PD, split out the doing things right part. You only need 4 hours, an hour a year or so. Not hard to get, because every course you took probably had some part of doing things right and accordingly ethics. Now the second way of doing it, if you're in practice, for instance, there are more than 3 hours worth of videos on this site about ethics, particularly about ethics, SQM 1 and 2. So again, get a colleague over, watch it together, record it, provide each other with a certificate, include discussion time, and maybe you decide that you want to do this every year to refresh your knowledge of ethics, and read the standard yourself to make sure that the presentation you're listening to hasn't got something wrong. But that then is ethics PD. Now, if someone is telling you that your PD program hasn't included enough about ethics, and maybe it's your fault because you thought you had to be taking course materials specifically about the code of ethics, which isn't true. The people telling you that probably should have pointed out to you what was on the previous slide, that many things and many aspects of many courses are about ethics. It's not just the code. And rather than getting you in trouble, they should have suggested maybe you need to just go and refile your declaration, because I'm going to bet that there was probably enough ethics stuff in there, particularly if you were taking accounting and auditing courses or doing accounting and auditing courses to get your PD. Now, just to be doubly clear, this is from the CPA Manitoba website, and I quote, "Just like all verifiable learning activities, for our ethics requirement can be fulfilled in many ways, including coursework, CPA or other, and other relevant learning activities, including in the workplace." And we've talked about that, and recording it, documenting it in a time log or something is all that's required for it to be verifiable. And to continue to be clear, and this is hard to read, but there is a long list of things that qualify as training in ethics. And down towards the bottom there, you'll see doing the right thing. But reputation and risk, bribery and corruption, I assume that's not learning how to do bribery and corruption, but how to prevent it or stop it. Anyway, long list of things that qualify as professional ethics, and many, many different ways of obtaining those hours. Now, it's all about documentation, as too many things are nowadays. It's not about doing it as much as it is about documenting it. Now, for instance, in this course that you've just listened to, we've talked about ethics during this material. How many hours can you declare as ethical requirements? Now, I remember a story. Early in my career, I was quite excited. I got to go to my first PD course. It was a 2-day long course. It ended up being dreadful, but never mind. I was kind of excited to go to a PD course. I wasn't taking CA courses anymore. I was taking grown-up PD courses. And one of the partners in my office came and sat down beside me. The attendance sheet came along. We signed up for the attendance sheet. And as the presentation went along, I looked over and he wasn't there anymore. And lunchtime, oh, there he was back. He was having lunch. And we sat down again, and the attendance sheet came around, and he signed the attendance sheet, and so did I. And then when I looked around again, he wasn't there anymore. So the following morning, I said, "Hey, what happened? You seem to have left for the whole day." And he said, "Well, I need my PD." And so he had signed up, signed the attendance sheet, documented that he was there, got his required hours of PD, and left. And as I said at the beginning, you lead a horse to water. So you can force someone to sit in a course, but you can't stop them from falling asleep. Can't stop them from paying no attention and not learning anything. Can't stop them from being on their phone all day long and not listening. It's about documentation. Now, between you and me, we should take this as an opportunity to learn some stuff, because there's lots of stuff changing. We need to be paying attention to that or we get left behind. But in the end, it's about documentation. So don't make the mistake of doing the required PD and then not getting credit for it because you didn't document it. And don't make the mistake of doing ethical PD in ethics, but then not being careful enough to split it out and call it ethics. So how do we make listening to this presentation verifiable CPD? Well, first of all, check the rules from your local CPA group, but first way is to watch the video, record the time, keep a log, and it's qualified verifiable CPD. And split out whatever portion you think of this is ethics. Now, the second way to do it is watch it with a friend or colleague, and each of you can certify that the other attended, and then you have verifiable CPD and a certificate. How fantastic. So, thanks for listening.